Welcome to Who Runs This Park, Park Enthusiast segment, where we expand our universe and knowledge of experiences in the outdoors and at national parks through conversations with highly regarded and respected individuals in the outdoor world. As always, Who Runs This Park aims to be a catalyst for inspiration, exploration, and appreciation of our world's natural beauty. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Who Runs This Park, Park Enthusiast segment. Today, we get to hear the story of Claire Smallwood, co-founder and executive director of SheJumps. I wanted to read SheJumps' mission in the intro because I personally think it is rad. Outdoor play that transforms. SheJumps increases the participation of women and girls in outdoor activities. Partnering with nature, SheJumps creates educational outdoor experiences for girls and women that nurture growth and transformation. Like I said, it's pretty rad. Claire herself has always had a passion for wild places, especially those that involve skiing. From being the president of her college's ski and snowboard club to becoming a ski instructor and guide in Chile/Argentina, she has been on the pursuit of fresh powder. She also had a stint as a professional chef in Alta, a Utah ski resort. Claire is a visionary leader in removing barriers for women and girls in outdoor recreation and beyond, and is passionate about equity, volunteerism, and nonprofits. I'm excited to get a sneak peek into her heart for all of these things. Claire, welcome to Who Runs This Park, Park Enthusiast Edition.
Thanks, Maddie. I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation with you today.
Heck yeah. I spoke a little bit about what the mission of SheJumps is, but I would love to hear it in your own words, kind of the mission and the vision of this organization.
Yeah, I think that for so many people, the outdoors can seem obvious. Like, oh, it's just so easy. Just go outside and have a good time. And that's what it is. But so many barriers exist. There are fear of failure, stereotypes, kind of a vision of what that outdoor person must look like or how they must kind of what those activities must be. But the mission really to me is that we seek to plant the idea that it's possible to live an adventurous and inspiring lifestyle, no matter who you are or where you come from. We want to give the tools to people to be able to do that.
I love that. And we were talking a little bit before this, and I'm going to bring it up kind of in the beginning of our intro, but I'm actually doing one of the SheJumps fundraising climbs. So we'll talk a little bit about kind of how you started those and what that entails. But for folks who aren't aware, I'm climbing Mount Baker in May. And the benefit of it is to get to fundraise for the organization that, plants the seed that people can kind of do the adventures they want to do or didn't even know they could do. But then it also is a catalyst for me to learn a new skill set and kind of do something that I maybe didn't know I could do or can't do on my own at the moment. And I also think it's the coolest thing ever to be doing it with all women and like having women guides and my whole team being women and all of that. So just a huge praise to that. And I'd love to hear I guess we can talk about the different things SheJumps does, but then also specifically spend some time on the fundraising climbs.
Yeah, for sure. So SheJumps, I mean, our whole vision, as you mentioned, is outdoor play that transforms. And so we have a number of different programs that offer that outlet, from our youth programs that focus on survival skills, such as teaching young girls how to build a shelter or use a map, how to use a compass, doing basic first aid, just really giving them skills so that they can say, I can go outside and I can be self-sufficient. I think that's a really important part of what we do. And then kind of wanting to carry that feeling throughout the adulthood, because a lot of times when people maybe leave high school or they transition into college or their adult life, maybe they're losing some of those team sports that used to bring them together in a community atmosphere and environment. And so much of what we do is really about making the individual experience about being outdoors be more of a community experience.
Mm.
So really wanting to give not just the skills, so like how to, like do some wilderness first aid or how to go ski mountaineering or any of those things, but the community with which to do it. We can only offer so many programs and events, but hopefully people take that leap, they get to our program and they meet other people that they can create that community experience with and go on more adventures.
Yeah, I hope people can tell the passion in my voice, but I love the outdoors for the community aspect. And so I am stoked to be talking with you because I just am really passionate about what y'all do and think it's so valuable, and it's cool to it's one thing to read the mission on the website, and then it's another thing to hear you talk about it and hear the passion in your voice. So I appreciate kind of all that you've done in creating this world and in like culture.
Well, thanks for saying that, Maddie. I mean, I think so many people forget that no one is born knowing how to do any of these things. I
Mhm.
know, for example, I watched a video, I think it was, I can't remember where it was. I think like maybe Cody Townsend posted this video of him skiing Denali and Michelle Parker
Mhm.
was there. I think Michelle Parker is basically one of my favorite skiers and athletes and advocates and just human. She just is so cool. And I kind of was like, I remember having this narrative in my mind going, "Ugh, well, I could never do that. And I remember saying it to a friend, being like, "Oh, that's just not for me." And she was like, "Well, not for you because you don't want to do it or you don't think you can." And I was like, "Oh, well, I just don't really think I can." And she goes, "Well, it's not like Michelle Parker came out of the womb knowing how to ski Denali." And it was like such a good, I think, reminder that, yeah, like you can do this. Like there are skills and tools out there to help make that happen. And, it's always baby steps. You kind of have to like start small, but eventually you can get there.
Yeah, I love that. Can you talk a little bit more about the fundraising climb specifically, just because I mentioned them, and then how the idea for that came about?
Fundraising climbs are definitely one of the coolest programs I think we have because it's actually both a program we're trying to provide an event and an experience for people, and yet it's also a major fundraising focus for us. It really, the fundraising that you're doing and all the other people that are doing those other climbs are doing helps sustain our organization. It helps us to have community responsive programming. So, for example, when our volunteers say, "Hey, we really want to do this donation based event that's going to impact a lot of people," we can say, okay, we have the funds to do that. And without people doing fundraising climbs or us helping us to bring in money and help us to sustain our organization, that would be really hard. So
Yeah.
thank you again.
Mhm.
The background for the climb started in 2016, excuse me. Christy Pelland, shout out Christy Pelland. She's amazing. She was one of our first ever just volunteers. She was just a volunteer for us for a long time and eventually actually became our a staff member, our program director, our first official
Cool.
program director. And Christy just always had this infectious, positive attitude and big ideas. And she came to me and was like, "Well, people always want to climb Mount Rainier. And we had gotten a guiding company to donate a climb to us. And we were like, well, how we could fill this climb, we could have people pay to go. But what if instead of people just paying us to go, we actually got them to get out to their community and share the mission and the vision of
Mm.
SheJumps?" And, it was the first climb was a lot smaller. It was on Rainier, and, I remember actually because we were so new to this, Christy and I actually hiked up with the group and kinda set up base camp, and I did all the cooking, and we
Oh my
kinda
gosh.
we set up, like, we had costumes, and we had, like, decorations, and we were encouraging everyone, and it was pretty great. We had a big group of volunteers come with us too. So that was the first ever climb, and then we eventually figured out that we could expand this to offer more climbs and locations. And that ultimately, we have people that now are interested. They've gone climbing once, maybe they want to do it again, and being able to kind of get that bucket list going. So people are going, great, I'm getting something that I get value and benefit from. And it's impacting our ability or our organization's ability to fulfill our mission.
Yeah, that's great. There's a ton of different directions that I wanna go with She Jumps, but I think before we dig into that a little bit more, we're gonna go back in time and just talk about kinda how your love for skiing grew, how your outdoor experiences grew and stuff like that. And a question I like to ask all my guests is, what is one of the craziest experiences you have had outdoors?
Well, your guests can't see this, but I have a huge smile on my face because I can guarantee I'm fairly sure I'm the only person that will tell you this, but it was that when I was a kid, more when I was like a teenager, my brother and I used to like to dirt ski and like
Oh my
dirt
gosh.
snowboard. So I grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I loved growing up there, but I will say the outdoors in Santa Fe now it's really popular. People have moved there and like the mountain biking and climbing and skiing is all really popular. But I feel like when we were growing up, it was just like kind of not something that everybody did. And I
Mhm.
don't know how my brother got the idea for this, but basically in the summer we would just like take our like go to the thrift store and like buy these old skis and snowboards and like click into them and actually just like ski down these arroyos and these like dry riverbeds. I mean,
Oh
horrible
my
for
gosh.
erosion, like, looking back, sorry, Mother Earth, that we did that to you, but at the same time, it was pretty funny for us, and we thought we were, like, training, like, extra hard for the ski season, but flashback to, like, well before that, my stepmom, Dot, she was the first person to teach me how to ski, and I was about 5. And, in like a lot of families, it was just an expensive sport. It wasn't something that people in my family really did. She did know how to ski. She taught us. We had a good time, but it was a school program that really lit the fire for me, similar to the
Really?
programs that She Jumps runs. And it was like this feeling of realizing that I could be good at something without having there to be like a finish line or a judge. Like being good at it was just like having the most fun. And I
Yeah.
remember that being like a moment of like a light bulb moment for me going, I can just be myself and I don't have to
Mm,
be worried so much about what other people are thinking and all of those pieces. I loved sports, but I just was never that good at them. Like it wasn't scoring goals in soccer. I wasn't winning in swim meets. Like skiing was just this place where I got to just carve my own thing out and it wasn't competitive at all. I never raced or anything like that.
yeah, it's awesome, and I've never thought about skiing that way, but I do think unless you're kinda going the professional track, it is this idea of how much fun can you have? So I love that. Do you have a favorite place to ski? I'm
I
I know
mean,
that might be a hard question.
it's actually not hard because I don't okay, so I don't live in Utah anymore. I live in Fernie, British Columbia. I married a Canadian, traveled I keep joking I travel further up north the Continental Divide with every like decade that I live because
Ah.
grew up in New Mexico and anyway. So Alta ski
Mm,
area, specifically the Wildcat chairlift, Westward Ho on a sleepy powder day where no one thinks it snowed enough and the parking lot's half full and I run into like random people in the chairlift and just I don't know. That's definitely I think Alta has a really special place in my heart from all the years I spent there and all the community members there and the snow. So yeah, I'd have to say, even though that's a really hard question for sure, I could be very specific even on the
yeah,
area and
even
any
the
of your
chairlift, I love
listeners.
that.
The listeners here, if they've ever skied Alta and been on the Wildcat chairlift, it's a very special little moment in time. It's really cool.
Yeah, for those I've gotten to ski Alta, I think twice, and I think it has some of the best snow on earth and just the ability to traverse like you can in a resort and get fresh lines is unmatched. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's I ski a lot more in Park City, but Alta, I cherish the days I get to ski there. So I love that you have that specific answer.
They've been really supportive of SheJumps over the years too. I mean, I cannot say enough, like, I don't think SheJumps would be what it is today at all without Alta's support. We've been running a program actually to get immigrant and refugee girls skiing for the last 16
Wow.
years, and they've donated in kind all of the lift tickets, rentals, instruction, everything to make that program happen year over year. And just like the deep commitment to that before SheJumps was anything on the map, any kind of like bigger nonprofit. They believed in us from the very beginning. So I'm sure that also factors into my answer a
Yeah.
little
Oh
bit.
my gosh. Absolutely. And you had said you spent some time there as a professional chef. So I'd love to hear about that journey of becoming a professional chef. And I have a couple other fun questions in that realm.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I never went to culinary school. So, I mean, I'm technically not a chef with a capital C. But that being said, I did cook as my profession for 10 years while She Jumps was getting off the ground.
Mm,
So, I was a volunteer executive director and getting paid to cook dinner, cook meals for people on vacation in Alta. And it was interesting how I started. So my stepmom is again huge influence in my life. I mean, everybody, my mom also cooked, my dad, etc. But my stepmom always made these really nice, simple meals every night after school. And I really appreciated that we had just a different meal to eat. Like it was just like nice to have a home cooked meal. And I
hmm
really appreciated that so much from a young age. And so I never really recall being like, one day I'm going to be a cook or anything like that. It just was something that I was always interested in and just loved to do. And I'd always worked in restaurants, so like both in the back of the house, front of the house. So
mm,
always had been in the restaurant scene. And so then fast forward, graduated from Lewis and Clark in Portland. Of course, trying to figure out what was next. We were trying to start She Jumps. I needed a job. And I remember moving to Alta, and I just serendipitously, my friend Mike Ray, he introduced me to my friend Bob Allen, who is the chef extraordinaire of Alta. Everybody knows him. He's this amazing, talented guy. And Mike said, "Hey, I think Claire needs a job. Bob, can you get Claire a job?" And Bob looked at me and he said, "Do you know how to make dessert?" And I actually don't really love making desserts, but I
ah,
totally lied through my teeth and said, "Absolutely. I love desserts." I've got tons of experience, completely lied, not really sure what I was getting myself into. And Bob said, great, show up tomorrow at 4 o'clock. And he just pointed to the house. I didn't even know how to get there. So I show up and Bob wouldn't even really let me do anything besides like make coffee and set the table for like probably the first like 2 months I worked for him. And the chalet is booked individually by families. Anyway, long story short, it's not exactly like a hotel, it's small groups of people. And I just kept showing up. I saw that Bob, what he had built there was this incredible mix of delicious, really well executed food with community. And people are like having the best time, right? They're
Mhm.
skiing every day. They're like healthy. They're feeling active. Like they've got, they're all interesting people from different backgrounds. And I just kind of quickly latched on, was like, I want to do that. Like I want to do what Bob does. And
Mhm.
so in the back of my mind, I kept thinking that was going to be my long-term career. I mean, I didn't know if She Jumps really had at that moment in time, and we're talking like 2007, 2008, like right when we found it. I didn't know maybe long term how much viability that had as a career, but it's been interesting because as She Jumps was growing, so was my career with Bob, and I started taking on my own clients. Eventually, he let me do other things besides just make coffee
Yeah.
and set the table. And yeah, so basically, as it all culminated about 10 years in when the owners sold the chalet and they asked if I wanted to take it over. Bob didn't want to do it anymore, asked if I wanted to take it over. And it was really bittersweet for me to say no. I'd been working towards this for that whole time. But at that moment in time, I was also finally in a position to take a salary from She Jumps. So it
Wow.
was kind of like, okay, this was a decision point, and I'm extremely happy with the decision I made. But I still love to cook. But yeah, I'm kind of, it's just a big, big, it was a big departure, I think, between the two things
Yeah.
in a moment in time.
Yeah, I think something that's coming through in your story is your love for community, and I very much so resonate with that because I think that's why I seek outdoor adventure so much because I think the type of community it creates is really special and, like, you have fewer distractions. You're immediately on a team essentially because you're each other's survival depends on each other essentially. And then I love that aspect. Talking about the communal aspect of the chalet makes me think of I did the Tour de Mont Blanc in Europe, and that had a really communal aspect because it's this hike that you hike essentially from France to Italy to Switzerland back to France. And you're staying at these little refugios and hostels within the mountains. But the community aspect is so strong, and like you're having these shared meals with people you've met on the trail. And so yeah, I'm just seeing that thread through our conversation. And I really love that aspect of your story.
Yeah, you're right though. That is exactly the through line for me. And I will admit, like there was a moment where we had at one point, I think this is like some of the challenges or struggles I had with She Jumps, where I remember the Blizzard Technica, which they're a big outdoor, they're a ski company for any of the listeners who aren't familiar. You've probably seen Blizzard skis before,
Yeah.
Technica ski boots, etc. But I remember they came and they rented out the chalet to do some kind of marketing meeting. And at this point in time, She Jumps was growing and it was getting a little bit bigger. And I remember being a little bit embarrassed. Like I had been emailing this company on behalf of She Jumps, and then there I was, the cook. I was like cleaning up, like doing their dishes. And I remember at first feeling like, oh, I should be ashamed because like obviously how can they take me seriously as the executive director of She Jumps when I'm like doing this other job that is essentially like kind of like I'm serving them. And
Yeah.
yet then I remember talking with Bob, who's my mentor and like one of my best friends about it. And he was like, no, you're showing them that you are the real deal, that you are the
Yeah.
person that like walks the walk, that you're out there like doing everything you can to make your dreams come true and to like impact the lives of others. And that you're not just some person who's like, yeah, I don't know. I kind of appreciated that shift in perspective, that the community aspect of it was like, don't hide away from the truths. Like we all need to come together and realize like, yeah, this is the industry. We have to figure out like ways to make ends meet. And like, this
Yeah.
is how we have relationships, I don't know. Maybe that's a
Yeah.
little bit of an aside, but it is something that for me came up, I remember in that transition period.
Yeah, no, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I guess we've weaved in and out of it, but because it sounds like your chef career and your She Jumps career were kind of side by side, and then you did have that pivotal moment. So I guess I would love to learn more about how you actually got the idea to start She Jumps and what that growing process was.
Yeah, so She Jumps I'm a co-founder, as you mentioned earlier, with Vanessa Pierce and Lindsay Dyer. Lindsay Dyer is an incredible and well-known professional big mountain skier. and, really well known for, I mean, basically kind of she was an inspiration for me growing up when I was like, doing ski competitions and stuff. I'm like, gosh, Lindsay Dyer, she's just like, she was on my wall as a poster. And
Yeah.
then so she and Vanessa had met. Vanessa is a journalist in the outdoor industry at this time. And she and Vanessa had met and had this idea for a website and a concept called SheJumps that would focus on profiles of women in the outdoors. They observed and remarked that there were just token women in these groups of men going and doing outdoor things. And Lindsay's kind of creative aspect of photography was going to be paired with building profiles with Vanessa's storytelling ability. And so
Mm,
this was kind of the original push for She Jumps, and the impetus was like storytelling and wanting to show that there are more women in the outdoors doing amazing things. And then I met them both through two different angles of ski competition. I ended up meeting Lindsay at, met Vanessa through just a mutual friend in Jackson Hole. And they told me about their concept and idea and asked my input. I had just gotten back from living in Senegal, living abroad, where I was doing research on local communities and storytelling. And really, I just had this like this feeling for me of wanting to do a greater good for the world. And what I heard from them was, hey, we have this need for more women to feel access and to feel like they have a space to fulfill their dreams in the outdoors. But what we don't have with this website is a way to structure programming into it. And so that was kind of, I think, really the inspiration to start was just like, well, how do we
mm,
scale this? We can't do a profile on every single person. How do we just make it so that there can be more people that you would
mm,
theoretically be wanting to profile, if that makes sense? So I think it was like building community was the first and foremost goal. And then focusing on a way to make there be more representation and having that be kind of a focus of, yes, we're going to have a couple of programs and events, but then make it an idea that people can like latch onto and hold and create for themselves in their local
yeah.
communities.
Yeah, that's really cool. Can you talk a little bit more about your time in Senegal and the work you did there? Because you had mentioned this and I was figuring out when it made sense to ask about it, but you brought it up perfectly.
Well, yeah, it's not something I actually feel like I talk about very often, but I in university, I was a foreign language and literature major, and I needed to study abroad as part of my degree. And I had the opportunity to choose between going to Senegal in West Africa or going to France. And I thought, don't know how many opportunities in my life I'm going to have to live in West Africa. So I
Yeah.
chose Senegal. My degree, my focus is in French, and they speak French there as it's the colonizing language. And so essentially, I remember my first aha moment of living there was we were there all studying French, but nobody speaks French unless you're in like a government institution. They're all speaking Wolof.
Mm,
So I immediately figured out that there was there's an opportunity when you integrate language into life to understand a community better. And I remember being kind of frustrated with my school that they didn't prepare us better with Wolof. And a lot of, there's just basically like there was some instruction on it, but I really wanted to learn it more. So I spent a lot of my first time over there learning Wolof. And then I applied for a grant to go back and study griots, which are oral historians in the
wow.
Senegalese and West African society. I just was so fascinated. They're kind of seen in Senegalese society as like a lower caste in the way that their society is structured there. However, they hold the most power in a lot of ways because they're essentially in charge of oral history and oral
Yeah.
historians. And the way it all integrates into community is so interesting because they have like these wrestlers, and the griots are like the cheerleaders that are kind of shouting on behalf of each family. And it's just like everybody comes together and is there to kind of listen to this group of people. And the
Wow.
language aspect of it is all really powerful. I mean, I could go on and on about it, but I think again, like it kind of connected me to the deeper understanding of the fabric that makes us human. Like we
Mm,
all have drama in our lives, comedy, history. We all need to know where we come from. And the way that that made me feel when I lived in Africa as well as a white person, I was like realizing that we have so much at our disposal in the West that I really just wanted to make sure I took my privilege and used it for something good. I kind of just felt that big draw. I think it was a big life changing moment for me to go over there and experience that.
yeah, that's amazing. And did you make a documentary? I have it marked down that you made a documentary while you were there.
I did, and, this probably shows my age. I mean, I'm not saying I'm, like, extremely old, but it was, like, right at the pivotal moment before YouTube was, like, extremely accessible and everybody just
Yeah.
uploaded their videos, so I have still been searching for it. I have it somewhere in my storage unit.
Oh
I can't
man.
find it right now, but I know that my alma mater, Lewis and Clark has it, so I've contacted them to ask if I can get a copy of it. But,
Oh,
yes, I did.
amazing.
I made a documentary about it as part of the grant that I got to go back
Oh, that's
and do
cool. That makes
research on
sense.
this. And then the other thing I did was I created a really basic language program for any students going in there in the future so that they maybe wouldn't feel as caught off guard by the wool off.
Yeah.
That's really like, as a white person being there, I just had personally, I can speak from my experience. I saw a completely different side of the culture and the experience as soon as I started speaking Wolof compared to when I was speaking French.
Wow.
So that was a really powerful moment for me. And I wanted other folks, if they wanted it, to have that
To have the access to it.
access. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think that's such a cool, I have so many thoughts with that. But I think first is just seeing something and being like, wow, if other people are in my shoes, like I want them to not be as caught off guard and like know kind of what the situation actually is here. So I love that you kind of created something like that. And then I love that and it probably ties into your decision to, when you had that crossroads of do I stick with being a chef or do I pursue SheJumps and see where it can go. It probably, your Senegal experience probably impacted your decision because like you said, on a larger, you're still impacting people's lives in a beautiful way as a chef and creating community. But I think the scope that you're able to do that with SheJumps is really large.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that that's like the experience of when we choose to do something. I think there's just like so often people overlook it in any aspect of what they do that you're having an impact on someone. And I think to what your point of, like the language piece and me wanting to say like, hey, there's a tool here. That's actually really a big part of this vision with She Jumps and maybe some of the challenges, but also I think some of the benefits of our model is that we really want to give those tools to our volunteers so that they're like, oh man, I've always wanted to go mountain biking, but I have no idea how to do it. Well, cool. I'm going to lead this event and I'm going to learn how to do it with everybody all at the same time. Like we can all learn how to do these things. And I
Yeah.
love that's like kind of the building block of what it is that we try to do at our organization.
Yeah. Can you walk me through the progression of SheJumps growing and how you got to the point where, like you said, you were able to take a salary and actually pour all of your time and energy into the project or not project, I guess, business?
Yeah, there's been so many amazing chapters, some brighter than others in
Yeah.
terms of I think anyone listening to this who's been involved with the nonprofit, either working for one, volunteering, or on a board. One of the challenges with nonprofits is that there's always an abundance of passion, and there's always a lack of resources. And I think that like balancing the growth and the resources has always been where magic happens and also like where some challenges have happened.
Yeah.
And so kind of I think the broad arc of it is that the grassroots passion and experience or yeah, I guess essentially the passion, the experience of volunteers and building a system in which we can consistently grow from those experiences of volunteers. So we're talking from like 2008 to say 2008 to 2013, we were like so grassroots. We were like a sticker that was like, hey, like host an event
Yeah.
and take some emails down and send them back to us. And like that was it. We weren't really like I think actively fundraising. We were like, I remember trying to do a strategic plan. I think it was just too much for like the lack of structure and resources that we really had. In
Yeah.
2013, we expanded a more structured volunteer approach where we had structured roles in each region where we tried to build, yeah, just like a team dynamic of understanding people's roles and responsibilities. Again, no one was paid, but we essentially had, yeah, we had, a little bit of structure,
Yeah.
some goals set out. And then it was really around 2016 when we did our first fundraising climb that we started to build enough revenue to be able to pay just a little bit, like a stipend, I think, to Christy and myself. And we had a couple of small staff members or contracted really volunteers that we paid to do
Yeah.
some things. But it was like, I think that like the tipping point was truly when it's funny. I think that it was like probably around like 7, 8 years into working in Alta and being a chef that I was like, if I don't put more time and energy into this, it's never going to become sustainable. It won't really
Right.
like get to that next level unless someone's willing to like really, really put their time and effort in. And then I think like because there's such a deep passion for the work, it's both a benefit and it can be a challenge because the deep desire to see the programs grow, again, it always kind of comes back to managing our resources. We have
Mm.
more demand for our programs than we can offer, than we can meet. And yet we also need to make sure that we're not revving our engines so high that we're like burning everybody out in the process. So I think
Yeah.
like the arc of it has kind of been, we always love the phrase structure sets you free. So we're trying to figure out now how to build out programs in a way that really allows, again, our volunteers to take the lead and build out the impact that they want to see in their local community, and really have them have that experience of making that change at a local level. No amount of funding can really change that magic, while also tying it into bigger initiatives and opportunities to change the fabric and the shape of the outdoor access problem that we have in the United States.
Yeah, I've never heard a nonprofit described like that, but I think it's so insightful of there's an abundance of passion, but you're always constrained by resources. And yeah, I just think that's such a good perspective. And it's interesting as I talk to superintendents like with national parks, the other side of the podcast, there's always passion to preserve the lands, but there's never enough funding to do all the things they want to do. And so it's kind of it's a different, obviously they're not a nonprofit, they're a government organization, but yeah, it's how do you cultivate that and not burn out the passion while you're building stuff out? So I really like that. And it sounds like She Jumps has a lot of great volunteers. So I'd love to understand what the role volunteers currently play within the organization.
Yeah, volunteers, I cannot stress it enough. We are a volunteer. I mean, we have 8 staff members, but we are a volunteer-led organization in so many ways. So we have about 140 volunteers on our roster.
Wow.
And those volunteers, I know it's amazing. And actually, I'm not sure when this will come out, but if listeners are interested in getting involved, we do a recruitment for volunteers usually every spring. You can find that
Oh,
information
great.
on our website. But we have several different specific volunteer roles. We have a regional director volunteer, which is actually like quite an amazing role for professional development and leadership development. The regional directors are volunteers that oversee maybe multiple states, but they're really there to kind of nurture and cultivate, programs and consistency for all of those volunteers in those states. So they're there to kind of help make sure the strategic priorities are kind of being met and encouraging, or maybe like overseeing them and, oh, this person stepped down, we're going to have to fill this role. Then at the state level, we have regional coordinators, and the regional coordinators are really kind of that magic leader person that's like they're saying, okay, I'm going to get everyone together for a team meeting. I'm going to make sure that
Mm,
these volunteers have the skills and the tools that they need to fulfill the particular program goals or anything like that. And then we have event coordinators and community ambassadors, and those folks are the ones that are boots on the ground, showing up, tabling at events, hosting events. They're talking about the mission of She Jumps, helping to fundraise, sell merchandise. Yeah,
wow.
all those kinds of fun things. And we have a volunteer manager who's a staff role that helps to oversee all of that. But really, all of our different staff roles help impact some level of those volunteers. And I'd be remiss to not mention that, of course, we also have an amazing board of directors who are also volunteers and help oversee that organizational strategy and direction. So the volunteers, we actually have an average tenure of about 2 to 3 years. So people
Wow.
apply for the role, they stay in the role usually for an average of 2 to 3 years. We have one volunteer that just celebrated 10 years, and
Wow.
we'll have another couple folks celebrating 10 years next year. So the longevity of it, I think, speaks to that deep passion. I think that we wanted to find the balance of letting people develop and drive what She Jumps looks like in their local community, which I think helps people to feel like they're really making a difference and they can see that firsthand,
Yeah.
which I think is a huge benefit. And hopefully one of the reasons why we've been able to attract and keep these volunteers for so many years. We're so grateful for their efforts.
Yeah, that's awesome. Building out, and we've alluded to this a little bit, but there's been so many seasons and some really bright, some maybe less bright. But I'd love to understand kind of the duality of building out She Jumps and what has been something really rewarding in this process, and then what has been particularly challenging.
Well, I think I can start actually with the challenge piece because I think it kind of speaks to maybe also what's been rewarding. But right now, like one of our big focus areas, we're doing a strategic plan right now. So in June, we hope to have kind of our next big 3-year plan to figure out what those
Wow.
priorities are. Very exciting time. But really what that looks like for us is we want to dial in. One of the challenges we have is a sustainable program strategy that enables our volunteers to excel at community building while monitoring that quality and impact, right? So I
Hmm.
think that it's one thing to be able to give the volunteers as many tools as possible and resources to enact She Jumps at that local level. But as we've grown as an organization and scaled, we also really want to be able to document and investigate the evaluation of those programs. So
Right.
for consistency, we want our programs to be more inclusive. We want to make sure that we're fostering a sense of belonging for participants
Yeah.
and ensuring that that's not just the same group of people over and over again. The outdoors are already overwhelmingly white in terms of participants, and also they're expensive. So usually the demographic is socioeconomically is going to be more middle to upper class. And so we really want to make sure that we're dialing in an opportunity to deepen that impact before we like theoretically expand a ton more. So that's been kind of one of those challenges. But that being said, one of our, I think, successes has been by taking this in a smaller sample size. We have two amazing programs. I was going to talk about the Snowpack Scholarship and also our program SheJumps into the Canyon, and they're a little bit interlinked. So my example that I wanted to share in terms of like one of these real bright spots that we've had is that we have our Snowpack Scholarship has basically two subsets of a program. We have our actual snowpack events, which are avalanche courses. These are
Hmm.
scholarship based events where 100% of the spots in an ARI level 1 or ARI level 2 avalanche certification course are for scholarship recipients. And of all of those spots, we designate 50% of them for women of color. So the Snowpack Scholarship's one element, but we also have our Icon Pass Scholarship, where we offer 30 Icon Passes and skis and lessons
Wow.
or snowboards to women of color because we noticed that of our programs, we were seeing predominantly white applicants, which is fine. We know that everybody needs an access to the outdoors, but we also know that women of color are the more historically excluded groups
Yeah.
when it comes to outdoor participation. So, this Icon Pass scholarship, we in 2020, we had a participant, Dione Rodriguez, apply for the scholarship and she received it. She had a great time. She learned how to ski. She always wanted to. And then Dione signed up to volunteer. She volunteered with us for a couple of years. And now we've actually hired Dione to run
Wow.
our She Jumps into the Canyon program, where she's working with girls from her own community, as she is a Mexican American woman herself, to take them skiing at Alta. And I just love the fact that through a scholarship program, we've been able to offer a skill. Dione has grown that skill, and now she's a leader in her own community as a result, which I think is a really cool impact story.
Yeah, there's this organization. So, a lot of my listeners know I'm based in Austin, but there's this program called Explore Austin, which is a sixth grade through 12th grade kind of progression program, which introduces kids from historically excluded communities in the outdoors to different outdoor disciplines. So they start with backpacking, then they do mountain biking, then rock climbing and canoeing. If it wasn't Texas, maybe skiing would be a part of that, but obviously we don't get enough snow.
Mm.
But it's I think great success stories for them are when kids graduate through the program and then become mentors or trip leaders after that. And it's that same thing that you're talking about of they're exposed to the outdoors, they're given the skills, taught the skills, and then fall in love with it and want to give back and give those skills to like the next generation. And it's a really beautiful thing. And I bring that up because I just started working with Explore Austin a couple months ago. But yeah, really, really cool. And
I was just going to say, there's so many great nonprofits that do that work. And I think that that's to what your point is like, we want to be able to give skills. So not necessarily all of our participants come back to us, but that they can create their own affinity groups, their own things in
mhm.
their communities. I love that theory of change, that idea that that's an output, like long term. It could be really hard to measure that. That's like, you always kind of want to work yourself out of a job. If SheJumps
Yes.
does our job, we actually don't need our programs anymore because everyone's out there encouraging, leading, engaging, inviting people to go along with them and has the skills to do so. So I love that you're involved with that. And yeah, shout out, donate to your local outdoor
Yeah,
recreation
honestly,
nonprofit.
wherever you are, look at the offerings because there's probably more than you think. We've talked a lot about skiing, and it sounds like skiing and kind of things related to that were what She Jump started with, but it looks like kind of the different offerings have expanded quite a bit. So I'd love to understand how you expanded into, I think you have fly fishing and you mentioned mountain biking. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, skiing's where we started because that's what we all knew. I think
Yeah.
we were all just skiers, so that was the focus. And I don't think that we'll ever really, move away from that. But that being said, skiing is like one of those sports where even if you have scholarship and gear and everything, I mean, there's just still a lot of barriers in terms
Yeah.
of all sorts of things. So, yeah, over the years, we've really wanted to expand more year-round programming. And one of the partnerships that's actually enabled us to do that so much more is All Trails, which is an
Oh,
awesome
wow. Yeah, I love all
app. If
trails.
you're, yeah, if you're familiar, and if you're not, it's basically a great app that allows you to look up any hike in the world and give, information on how to get there, what to expect, like how to do the hike, like tips, photos, etc. And All Trails reached out to us and we started a partnership a couple of years ago, and they've been just so generous to us with unrestricted funding so that we can really put more energy and emphasis into more year-round programming,
Mm.
including offering hiking events as part of our Get the Girls Out. So, Get the Girls Out is a campaign to unite and encourage women and girls to get outside during the month of March. And typically,
Ooh.
those programs historically have always been really focused at ski areas. Even if it's snowshoeing or cross country skiing, they're always really focused in those resort locations, which can present a barrier in terms of transportation, maybe community people to go with. You're not sure, it's an unknown environment, etc. So, being able to expand, Get the Girls Out into hiking events, which is what All Trails has helped us do in locations where maybe you're really far from a ski area or there's just not snow. Now we're offering more, yeah, beginner and entry level hiking events to make sure that that's also a big, area of access. So that's been one thing. But in addition to that, certainly yes, as you mentioned, mountain biking. We do a lot of guide led programs. So we'll do a lot of like introduction to climbing, for example, so that
Mm.
you can really learn all of those skills that are needed, where we're not having volunteers lead those, but we leave that to, certified experts so that safety is a top priority for our participants. We like to do some rafting events, just really anything that gets folks outside. But in case anyone's listening here and they're not anywhere near where we have our programs or our events, one of the things we really like to do is encourage people to do micro ventures. So if you go to our website, we actually have all these really fun activities that you can just do in your backyard, in your neighborhood, at a local park. Yes, they're kind of kid focused, but we've heard people do adult kind of camps with all of the activities as well. So they're really fun. And that's just one of the ways in which we've tried to make it be not so focused on skiing.
Yeah, and I'm with the Get the Girls Out, I'm like, "Okay, I might connect with you about Texas specifically." I love that. I have to ask because I know we've talked about skiing a little bit, and this is more just a curiosity of mine. So it's diverging a little bit from SheJumps, but you spent a lot of time in Chile and Argentina. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that just because those are places on my bucket list.
Oh, that was you have these moments in time, I think, as you get older when you look back and you go, wow, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And also it's one of those things that when I was working down there, I knew it in that moment. I knew
Mhm.
there was never a moment that for me was like, I don't know, I'm like not into this or what's next, or like I was just living in the moment every time I was down there. So basically, I was approached by Casa Tours, which is a ski and snowboard tour company that takes basically North Americans usually down to Chile and Argentina and takes them on these guided trips to all the different ski areas. And Gomez, who's the owner, Dave Johnson, everyone calls him Gomez, he reached out to me and he's like, I hear you speak Spanish fluently. I hear you, you're love to ski, you're a great skier. And, basically kind of like was offered me this job. I had never even been to Chile or Argentina before.
Wow.
I fly down there. I actually my ski bag flew off the top of the bus that we were traveling in on my like third day there and got run over by a semi truck. Like, yeah, it was pretty rough moment. But anyway, I did persevere. I skied on some 192 Black Diamond Zealot skis for any of the listeners. They're like basically 2x4s for like 3 weeks. So I waited for new skis. But
Wow.
anyway, it was a total adventure. Loved all my time down there, but yes, I worked for Gomez and traveled all around to all the different ski areas and just, I was part ski instructor, part cultural guide, just like translating
Yeah.
menus and hanging out with folks and just
Yeah.
experiencing it all along with them. And then over the years, so I worked with Gomez for 2 years and then I started working with Powder Quest, which is another similar company. Then that was where I got my first, I would say it was like the dream job of all dream jobs, where I was the assistant coach with Ingrid Backstrom for a women's free skiing camp. And I mean, I literally like, I still cannot believe to this day that I got that opportunity to do that. It was really, really cool. And I've meeting Ingrid, I'd met her before, but getting to meet and spend time with her and see how down to earth she is and the rest of the group, how passionate everybody was for skiing. But certainly Ingrid, I feel just in awe of her honest passion. Like
Mm,
there's never a moment when you really have to convince her to go skiing. And the conditions on that trip got pretty bad at times. Like it was
mm,
raining and it was all these kinds of different conditions, but she was just so passionate about it. So I met my partner in South America. He was working as a producer on the Art of Flight movie with Travis Rice. And yeah, we did long distance for a long time, and now I'm living in Canada. Most
wow.
Canadian and American meeting in Chile. But yeah, I love those 2 countries so much and can't wait to get back there soon. No, She
Yeah.
Jumps is my full-time job. I have a little bit less flexibility on that front, but it was a big moment, I think, for me living that She Jumps walk the walk, like, or, kind of like acting my passion. I
Yeah.
remember at that moment having different times where I had to balance, like I was still a volunteer executive director, but we still had things I had to do. And balancing all that was really stressful, but I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. It
Yeah.
was really incredible.
What is a free ride camp?
We were just focusing on just exploring terrain and then focusing on techniques and skills that are outside of like off-piste skiing. So we were, just wanting to explore as much terrain as possible. And I think it's more just it wasn't necessarily focused on like skiing groomers and like, you know, technical tips. It was like technical tips, but hey, we're gonna like ski this piece of terrain and just have a good time. And then if somebody wants some tips or tricks, we're kind of there to help them out with that. I feel
Yeah.
like the word free ride is kind of just meant to encompass just non-traditional. That's not like racing gates or
Right. Right. So are you skinning and backcountry skiing in those contexts?
not in that particular event, but yes, like theoretically, like backcountry free ride would be kind of defining that as, where you're hiking up to a particular area to then find your own creative way down. And sometimes free ride skiing meets freestyle skiing where people are integrating like actual tricks,
Yeah.
into the descent. Whereas, yeah, I think free ride is again just kind of meant to denote that it's non-traditional. It's skiing that is, yeah, like maybe just again unpredictable terrain and ski and snow conditions is
I
maybe
see.
more of a way to describe that. So it's kind of like outside of your normal realm. Thanks for letting
Yeah.
me talk that through because I recognize not everyone listening to this podcast will know what free ride skiing and free ride camp means. But
Yeah.
just
I
imagine we're
mean,
searching out the powder.
yeah. I love skiing and I have some backcountry experience and it's new to me, so there's always more you can learn about all the different worlds. As we wrap up our time, I want to say I've absolutely loved chatting and hearing about She Jumps and just the passions you've pursued in your life. I'd love to kind of have our last question be just how you're looking forward for She Jumps. What I know the strategic plan is probably a big project over the next couple months, but what do you think the future looks like for She Jumps?
Well, it's emotional for me, but I think, I'm 17 years in. And I think at some point I might be thinking I haven't put a date on it, like what's next for me. And I think at some
Yeah.
point looking for new leadership will be on
Mm.
the horizon. Don't send in your resumes yet. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But that being said, I think it's just like really thinking long-term sustainability for the most impact, where that might look like saying no for the next couple of years on a couple of things in order for us to really be able to flourish with some better structure. And I think
Yeah.
that it's that sustainable program strategy that really enables our volunteers to excel at community building because
Yeah.
that's the secret sauce. Like the volunteers that we have and the community members that we have that show up to events, we really want to make sure that we're prioritizing their experience for inclusivity and a space to belong, especially because I think, and this speaks to short-term and long-term goals, just joy. We want people to feel more joy. There's a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
love
reasons not
that.
to feel joy, and we just need to make sure that we're thinking about how that looks and what that feels like, no matter where you are.
Yeah. Oh, what a good mission. Well, thank you so much, Claire. It's been a joy. Thanks for sharing your time and your story.
Thank you for having me on here. This has been an absolute pleasure, and I love our national parks. By the way, my favorite national park is Grand Canyon National Park.
Heck
I had to
yeah.
throw that in there.
Heck yeah. Yeah, we had so much to talk about that we didn't even jump into all of that. So yeah, thank you again, Claire.
Thank you, Maddie.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening today. If you like this podcast, please share the word. Who Runs This Park's success relies on you rating, reviewing, and sharing the word about the podcast with your friends. If you have an idea for someone you want me to interview for this new segment, send me an email at maddie@whoruntsthispark.com or DM me on Instagram @whoruntsthispark, and we'll make it happen. Thanks again. So thankful for listeners like you. See you next week.